My name is Zukiswa Wanner, and I am joining you on the final panel for Litafrika 2, which was done in conjunction with Strauhof Museum and Stiftung Litter in Zurich, and myself as curator for Litafrika 2. The first part involved Al Imfeld's work, his interviews with African writers from across the continent. And the second part involved an exhibition that opened on June 16 and is ongoing until September 3. And this exhibition has 8 visual art, it's got 8 writers and 8 other artists, amongst them visual artists, performance artists, and I'm lucky to have 2 of the performance artists that interpreted some of this work today. Prudence Katomeni is joining us from Zimbabwe and is a musician, and Maïmouna Jallow is an actress, and she's joining us. Maïmouna, where are you? Are you in Portugal?
No, I'm in near Barcelona.
Okay, all right. Maïmouna is joining us near Barca. So welcome, guys, to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, you, Prudence, you interpreted, I think one of my favorite, both of you interpreted 2 of my favorite things, by the way. You did Tram 83, an excerpt of Tram 83, and you put it into music.
Yes.
And
yes.
And Maïmouna, you did Season of Crimson Blossoms by Abubakar, and you performed that, you acted that out, and you gave us a bonus because you came with another person on the show. Can you tell us about the art of interpreting words? Prudence, you can start.
Wow, okay. For me, it's, I think as an artist, I speak with for a lot of artists. When you see how we get inspired, it's not only through nature, you know, or our surroundings, but sometimes it's through certain words that have been shared to you. So these words can come in the form of poetry, you know, or a book and stuff like that. And the way it speaks to you, obviously you have to reciprocate, you know, and give back how you feel you can reinterpret, you know, that message in the way you have understood it yourself. And I think with that happening, you get to reach out to a wider audience, you know. Yeah.
Prudence, I might ask you to put off your camera because you are flickering.
I know, I know. Okay, let me do that now.
Same question to you, Maïmouna. How was that for you, the interpretation?
Well, I love the process of adaptation and reinterpreting and reimagining something that has already been birthed by somebody else. It's always such an honor because you're basically taking somebody's baby, because everybody's artistic creation is their baby. I mean, I always see it as a process of gestation and finally the giving birth of this thing. So to be able to honor that work and then to add your own interpretation to it is always a very special process. For me, I guess part of it was done by you because I didn't have to select which extract to do, but it was also very difficult because it's also one of my favorite books, Season of Crimson Blossoms, and I wanted to make sure that I did it justice. And yet this extract, had a lot of third-person narrative, and then it had a sex scene, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But that challenge actually allowed me to, I think, play in a very beautiful way. So I really wanted to show this tenderness between this older woman and this younger man who have fallen in love or in lust, let's say, and it's this prohibited affair that they're having. So it allowed me to play. So for example, in the book, you know, he talks a lot about the petunias, the flowers that are out in the garden. So I used those flowers on the body to symbolize the tenderness between them, the sensuality between them, and also bringing in this element of nature, because we're of nature and part of nature. And then I also had to think a lot of what symbols I could include. So things like the henna painted on my hands to, in a sense, portray that this is a woman from northern Nigeria, a Muslim woman from northern Nigeria, the beads around her waist. So all these little details which an author will reveal in their text, but when you have a very short time to translate that into film, you have to select what it is that you include. So for me, the process of adaptation is, first of all, a process of imbibing that text, but then selecting what it is that you want to show. And it's always a lot of fun.
You know, I remember watching that and just thinking, oh my God, this is absolutely amazing, because you packed so much into a short clip and gave so much of it. But perhaps for both of you, you managed to do that so well, because this wasn't your first rodeo with artistic encounters. You know, you, of course, Maïmouna, you did The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives, which you did a full-length feature of, and you have traveled quite a bit with that. How's that been going?
Oh man, that, you know, whenever I speak to Lola Shoneyin, the author, about the novel, she refers to it as the gift that keeps giving. And the same thing has happened with the performance. I never imagined, you know, that it would travel to many places. I'm now doing it for the final year until December in Spanish, because the book has
wow.
Yeah, the book has been published in Spanish. In fact, it is the only book that has been translated, African book by this publisher that has a second edition out already. So we're tremendously pleased by that. But it's been a journey. And for me, it was really my first foray into the whole adaptation process. I started off as a storyteller, telling more traditional stories, although reimagined folktales, as I like to call them. And Baba Segi's Wives has just allowed me to explore this sort of creative actor side of me that I didn't even know existed. Yeah.
And where are some of the places that it has taken you to, this particular adaptation?
Oh, wow. Everywhere. I've been to Singapore, to Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates, obviously Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, Egypt, the UK, Scotland.
And of course, Kenya, where it all started.
In Nairobi, you know.
Where it all started.
Artistic encounters.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, fantastic. And the same question to you, Prudence. You actually released a single from your last Artistic Encounters foray, your first Artistic Encounters foray. Tell us a bit about that collaboration and what you decided you were going to do differently this time.
Yes. Okay. That was absolutely amazing. Charting into those waters. With because I did my my collaboration with Adipose Sitang, and he chose one of his poems, Hawio, and that was absolutely fantastic. Just going through first the poem and what it spoke about, and you know, and things like that, and then trying to adapt that. I'm a musician who usually travels with either an accompanist, like a pianist, a guitarist, a band. But for this one, I had to be a one-man band. I play the mbira, but I think you have more confidence in my playing than I do.
I was very insistent that you bring the mbira, although I know you for playing the piano, obviously, from a very young age.
Yeah. So yes, so I had to step up. I had to step up with the mbira, but it was great because it was discovery of what more I could do on the instrument, on the mbira instrument, and then coming up with the particular lines, and then trying to again reinterpret what he was talking about in the poem into just a few musical melodic lines. It was absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing for that particular encounter. Yeah.
And then now, you know, from interpreting poetry and now to prose, what did you have to do differently? Did you have to do anything differently? I know that Fiston reads in a rather poetic way anyway.
Yes, he does. Oh my gosh, yes.
But yeah. But what did you have to rethink? What did you have to refigure as you were working through it?
Well, what I can tell you is I got to, you know, because when you're singing as well, you have to go into character, just like, you know, acting and stuff like that. And from the excerpt that you chose, for whatever reason, one of the ladies of the night spoke very loud. And for me, then when I started to write the piece, it was more from her perspective. And it's a character that I've dabbled a little bit in acting, but I've always been cast in.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, a little bit.
Sweet,
we know you were in movies.
But you understand the characters are always the sweet, the church going girl and so on. So this was absolutely exciting, being you know, interpreting that particular character, you know, the lady of the night, and writing in that perspective. So I guess what was different is discovering that particular side of me that I had to search for, and yeah, and expressing it through music. Yeah.
Right. Over to you, Maïmouna. I mean, the first time I started knowing you as a communications person, and then you really just went full on into art. What led to this, and how are you maneuvering it, perhaps as a person coming from not just a continent, but a world that questions the whole idea of art as or artistic pursuits as rather frivolous and shallow?
Gosh,
how are you doing it as a full-time job?
Anybody who thinks that should remember the pandemic and what kept them alive, which was books and music and art, all forms of art. Just before answering that, I wanted to bounce off what Prudence says, because you did really challenge us the same way Prudence had to, you know, sort of get into this character that was different from her. For me, actually, this video, Season of Crimson Blossoms, was the first time I was acting to camera. So I've made a film and I've directed it, but I had never acted on film. And there suddenly there was this camera right in my face, and which captures all your expressions, unlike on the stage where you're sort of have to exaggerate more because you're a distance away from the audience. So that was very exciting. And also the decision to perform it and direct, I was like, maybe next time you shouldn't do that. But obviously, you know, limited time.
You did an amazing job of it. I think also there was the intimacy, how you played out the sex scene with the hibiscus, with the flower and stuff and everything. I thought that was like very nicely done. Very, you know, it teased us, it teased the audience, but it didn't tell us. You know, we knew it was beautiful. So I don't know whether I would have been able to do something that amazing, but yeah.
Thank you. I mean, several things helped, you know. I think having a woman filmmaker who was also, I think there's a certain sensuality that came out. So the person who was filming it is a woman. For me, that was important. You know, she brought in these elements of saying, let's put some leaves near the camera so you get this kind of effect. And then also the fact that Malik, the male actor, didn't speak English. So therefore we had to do his voiceover. Somebody else had to record his voice. But then again—
oh wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, little tricks of,
The trade.
But he didn't speak English. So I got a friend in London to do the voiceover. He goes by Entire. But then in a sense, it worked because I very much wanted to be her story. So the fact that he remains silent and that we only hear his voice as a voice that's far away, that is being voiced over, for me then worked with what I was trying to say, which was that whilst there's this love story between the two of them, very much it's her recounting,
Her is a story, yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add that you have pushed us and challenged us. And I think that's what's really nice with artistic encounters, that it allows us to experiment and explore. And for me, it was definitely my first time exploring being on camera. And it was quite enjoyable, although sometimes I felt like cringing, but it was quite enjoyable.
I tell you now, Abubakar loved it, and I don't know anybody who's seen it who hasn't loved it,
Oh, great.
Oh,
That's such a pleasure, because one thing you want is for the person whose baby you have taken to at least approve of it. So I was very glad when he said that he was happy with the final product. In terms of, where this artistic journey has taken me, so you asked, when we met, I was a recovering journalist working in communications. And I think for me, the impetus was really, I guess, when you work in comms or as a journalist, you're always being told what to say, or they're big limits in terms of what you can say. You're either there to report facts and be objective, or to pass on a message. And for me, being able to work in the performance space through stories has allowed me to say the things that I want to say, and to choose what I say. So for example, with Baba Segi's Wives, although it's not originally my text, it was really an opportunity to talk about things that certain women face on our continent, without making them, victims, or,
giving them
agency. Yeah. And I think that with all my work, including with the film, for example, where you're hearing the voices of people who are often not allowed to speak for themselves, is saying, can we please pass the microphone and allow other people to speak and hear diverse voices? So it's been amazing. And yes, it's true, financially it can have an impact, but the freedom to do what you love, I think, is priceless.
I'm just going to take you a little back before I throw the same question to Prudence. And I just wanted to talk about your film, which has been doing absolutely amazingly well. I know it's done festivals and stuff, and you did it during lockdown. Talk us through it and tell everybody about it so that they can go and find it. Because I watched it and I thought it was brilliant.
Thanks, Zuki. Well, it's called Tales of the Accidental City, and it is yet another, work of adaptation, because it's adapted from 4 short stories by 4 different writers, 3 of them Kenyan writers, Sitawa Namwalye, Kevin Wachiro, and Margaret Muthe, and one of the stories is by me. And so basically, it's through these short stories that I had the basis of who these characters were and the worlds that they inhabited. But then what I did is that I plucked them out of their worlds and put them in an anger management class together, and then created the role of the therapist. And essentially, yes, it was a film created during lockdown. So all the action takes place on a Zoom call. I think it's definitely a film of its time. I wrote it as a stage play. When COVID happened, I was like, oh, I'm not going to shelve this, which is why it became this experimental film. I never imagined I would work in film. And it's really, I think, the story of Nairobi through these 4 characters, and they explain what caused them to create a certain misdemeanor, a certain act of violence that landed them in this therapy session. And through their personal stories, I think we learn a bit about Nairobi, the city that on the one hand is a place of opportunity for many people, but also spits people out. As one of the characters says, it can be quite difficult when you live on the margins in such a big metropolis. I think it's similar in any big African city. So that's Tales of the Accidental City. We're still doing
And where can people find it?
That's the big question.
We've done a lot of festivals.
Yeah, we've done a lot of festivals. Now we're trying to get it on a platform, but we still haven't been able to. But if by December it's not been taken up by one of these, platforms like Showmax or something, it will be available on YouTube, because I want people to see it at the end of the day. Yeah.
Fantastic. We look forward to it. Well, we hope somebody takes it, because everybody involved could absolutely suddenly use the money. So that's of course our first thing, but if it must go to YouTube, then hopefully people will see it on YouTube, but we hope it doesn't go to YouTube. We hope Showmax, Netflix, we hope you're listening.
Yes.
Right. Prudence, same question to you. Well, with you, I've always known you as an artist. Like from primary school, you were like on stage singing sunrise, sunset, whatever, and playing and playing the piano and singing lead in school plays. And then you went on, of course, to do movies like More Time, but also like doing a lot of music, which is what both film and music is what Zimbabwe knows you most for, and I suppose Southern Africa as well. How has this journey been for you? I mean, there is that, and then you're dealing with an economy that kind of goes up and down all the time, and of course you are a parent to a very hands-on parent to quite a few boys in that household of yours. So how has it been working for you? Like this journey which you started, I've known you being an artist since you were like 10 or 9.
That's true. That's so true. A journey that initially growing up in my family, they're musical, they were very strong Christians, and music was always a daily regime, kind of thing. So music was really a part of my family. But to be honest, the time we met, I never saw it as a career, right? I just said, look, this is something that pretty much happens in our household. We come together, we sing during Christmas, birthdays, just before prayer and stuff like that. But obviously, the music teacher and being around other artists like Felix Mazzorera, Mrs. Reynolds, discovering Felix, Ricardo Batista, all those people.
And Winam Samati, who's now really big on stage.
Yes, exactly.
Lucian Samati, as we know him.
Exactly. So, having all those people around me, it was like, so I could do this. I really, it's enjoyable, and I could do it. And even though I didn't take it seriously until after post high school, it was definitely a big part of my life. Acting as well is something somebody else discovered that I could do when I was 14, and that's when I did my first movie. So it's something that the arts, music, acting, it's something that has always been around me, but especially in my younger age, but never really took it very seriously. Like, what, I could actually take this on, as a career. I think it is in my young adult life when then meeting other mainstream artists and getting to work with them. That's when I started really engaging this art form and doing all I can to polish it, get better at it, and see how best I can make a living out of it. And like you said, it's very difficult in Zimbabwe, trying to make, especially the time I started, it was something that was frowned upon, that, and so very difficult to try and make it into a career. I really appreciate the people who have always been around me, from comfort, from people like Mrs. Reynolds and other artists who kind of cheered me on and pushed me on. I think without them, I would have steered away and probably found work and making a living through other, career paths.
You would have been a school teacher.
I think I would have been a chiropractor. That's where I was actually going. I don't know what the fascination was, but definitely in that field. But funny that you say that, a teacher, because I think after I had my third baby, I decided I just needed to take a break and be more hands-on, because the support system that was helping when I would tour, when I had the first two boys, they had moved on with their lives and, kind of thing. So I didn't have that same support structure in place. So I had to be almost 100% hands-on with the kids. With that also then came a teaching opportunity. And at that time I thought, look, with all the travels and experience, it's important that I shared this in a teaching environment to the younger generation, and also shine a light on how to do it better than probably how I had done.
I did.
So I've been, So I've been teaching, still doing that. It's a chapter that probably in its as a full-time teacher, that's kind of coming to an end, because obviously once an artist, it's always beckoning, it's calling you and so on. So I'm probably going to be going back almost full-time back on stage. The boys too they're out of the coop, and the others are, they can look after themselves. So I'm working on that, just going back into it, exploring more movies, because even through all this, I did do a couple more movies, explore theater, really go deep into the whole arts thing, because I truly believe now, if I didn't earlier in my years, I truly believe now that my purpose is to serve in the arts. That's definitely my purpose.
Purpose is to serve in the arts. That's beautiful, actually. And perhaps let me bring you back to something that you said about passing on knowledge to the next generation, because so often I think you have a certain type of artist who thinks their generation is the last person to do it, the last generation to do it. And so there isn't that intergenerational engagement, and you're not doing it just in Zimbabwe. You were also like doing it like in Ethiopia and quite a few other countries on the African continent. And I think even in France you did some workshops and stuff. And how was that? Like, does it spur something in your creative process as well when you're like engaging with people who are not just like your generation, but like from other generations, and you find out, well, maybe I could do this thing differently? Or is it something like where you're like, are you a purist about my personality, my voice as an artist, and this is what Prudence Katomeni is, and therefore nobody else can dissuade me from this space?
No, actually, first of all, working with the younger generation, it changes, it challenges, because you may go in thinking, things should be done in this certain way and that certain way. But if you listen to them, you can hear that it's their ideas, sometimes even though rough. These are ideas where the music industry, especially in Zimbabwe, is evolving. If that makes any sense, it's an opportunity for it to evolve and to become something and to grow into something different. So I've then tended to become like a guide, through that whole process. Hear what they have to say, share from my experiences, what has happened, observed what the world is like now, and then see how then their ideas can actually find a voice in the new world. So it's been a challenge. I'm not I guess at the same time, you could say in teaching, I went in thinking I'm one of those, I'm going to teach them what I know and that's it. But I
you were taught.
I was taught, basically, and you're right there, you know. But then, of course, you try and get the upper hand and you're like, look, you've got the most experience. So it's about guiding that and then also taking that as well. Because just because, you know, they're younger, it doesn't mean that their ideas cannot inspire you. And that's one thing I've also taken into consideration. For instance, there's a song that I released earlier this year, and I worked through it. And the song, because I had been kind of very quiet in the music industry for a while because of the teaching gig, I decided, look, I just need to re-engage my audience and just kind of, you know, start that whole, relationship that I have with my fans. My oldest son, has gone into the arts as well. So he took the song, and for the longest of time, he was like, Mom, I'm hearing this idea. And I kept, you know, kind of trumping it down. But I then just, you know, sat down, thought about it, and I thought, you know, this is actually such a great idea. So I gave it to him, and the boy ran with it. And I tell you, my phone won't stop ringing with local artists saying, so could you hook me up with your son's number? Because, you know, we've got this song. And so I'm thinking, wow,
nice.
You know, and there was mom being mom and trying to shoot down these ideas, you know. So yeah, I'm being schooled.
Maïmouna, intergenerational dialogues. How have you learned from the youngers and the olders? And I know you've done quite a bit of work across generation in your art. Let's talk about that.
So I think for me, there's been two parts to it. On the one hand, I really, really, really believe in and stand by this idea of Sankofa. Do not be afraid to go back and get it, which is what kind of led me to exploring traditional African stories and then saying, how can we also reimagine them to make sure that they speak to issues that matter to young people today? So on the one hand, it's making sure that we don't leave behind the older generation, who I think have still so much to teach us, and that sometimes in this very fast-paced, forward-looking world, we try to overlook them. So really it's connecting that, you know, that wealth, that tradition that we have in terms of oral storytelling and stories, and the values that older generation can teach us still. And making sure that younger audiences have access to them. But then the other side that's been really interesting and fun has been, so I've been facilitating some artistic residencies, and most of the time the artists that are taking part are in their very early 20s. So perhaps they have 1, 2, 3 years experience. And it's just been so much fun. First of all, their energy, the vitality, and you realize that all they need is a space to be able to express themselves. Because it's true, no matter where you are in this career, I think there's always this imposter syndrome that we carry with us. So to be able to have these young people in a space, allow them to see how much value they have, how much worth they have, that their ideas matter just as much as anybody else's. When you give them that kind of space to work in, it's just amazing what they create and what they produce. So I did one a couple of years ago now in Nairobi with 16 young artists, and they had 3 weeks to co-create and put together a show, and this was multidisciplinary. So you had sculpture, music, performance, acting, poetry, rap, everything you can imagine. And in just that little amount of time, they put together this performance called Look Me in the Eye. Not the eye, but the eye, as in, you know, the core of who I am.
Yeah. Me.
Yeah, it was just Honestly, for me, those experiences are priceless, because just like Prudence says, you learn as well. It's not just that you're teaching. I think more you're holding space, perhaps because of experience, because you've also been given the role of facilitating a process. But you learn as much as you teach. You're teaching techniques to help them draw their ideas out. And perhaps production skills, because I think that's super important when you're putting together any kind of show. So, you know, the lists, I'm known for my lists, and making sure that, your transitions are on point. So those kinds of skills. But in terms of the artistic creation itself, I was really blown away, and I really love working with young people. In October, I'll be doing another residency, but here in my village in Spain with young people. And I've been warned, you know, these are young people that sometimes find it difficult to engage while they're just young teenagers and can be quite disruptive and things like that. But I have a feeling that once you put them in a space where from a very at an early stage, you establish that this is their space and they will decide what comes out of it, and you give them the power to create what they want to create, that beautiful things come out of it. And definitely we have to be doing things across generations.
I actually have no doubt that you will just make an amazing job of it, even with these young students, because I think one of the things that I know about you and Prudence as well is just how incredibly professional you both are. You know, it's like art is, in a lot of ways, it's play, but it's work. And I think it's part of the reason why I think, like, even when I was curating this particular project, I was like, okay, I need these two particular people in this project, you know. Excellent. At this point in time, I think we would like to, if there are any questions from the audience, Nicole, I don't know, are there any questions on YouTube or from the audience, or shall we continue with our conversation? Nicole?
Yeah, there are no questions from YouTube so far.
Okay, all right. We'll continue with the conversation, but if anybody at any point in time wants to ask questions, please go ahead. And so what next, Maïmouna? I mean, apart from this workshop and hopefully us seeing you on Showmax or Netflix, what next for you? You know, what are the crazy artistic ideas that you have in mind? And you always come up with like new things, man. I mean, I'm thinking about even when you started with the story come, the adaptation of traditional fairy tales into making them more modern. But constantly, it's like you're always pushing the bar. What next?
Well, what I'm super excited about at the moment is a musical that I've written called Wata. Wata as in water, Pidgin English for water. I actually wrote this during the pandemic as well, but it's one of those that once the script was ready, I wasn't quite sure how to move it forward, and I felt a bit stuck with it. I think because I see it as a big production. So there's 26 cast members. There's original music, which is written and composed. And I want people like, you know, Sheun Kuti to be on board. And what's his name in Senegal? Mukunda Sissoko. You know, so it's just such a big thing, even for me. I tend to go big, but yeah, so the original music, choreography. I love the script. I feel that the script is ready. It's been through several processes of revision and rewriting. As you know, writing is rewriting. So I feel confident about the script. But it's just such an important project for me because when I wrote it because I was a bit disappointed. You know, our kids' schools in Nairobi, you know, you go to see the school play and they're doing Cinderella or Rapunzel and these kinds of things.
Yeah. Oh, God.
So this Wata came out of that. I was saying, why don't we have African content plays that schools can do. And schools often need plays where every child has a role, even if it's just hitting a tambourine on the side, but that everybody is involved and that the 200 kids across all age, across 3-year groups are involved. So this is a bit.
They always used to, Prudence will tell you this. My singing was so bad, they always had me in the chorus so that everybody else would drown my voice. And when it came to I was the person who did the triangle. Then, because it so you just gave me some bad flashbacks right there.
Well, this is a play that includes the triangle. Instead of the triangle, we'll have the drums, the flute, the mbira, all these instruments. So aside from basically it being very inclusive in the sense that it's big cast, if schools want to reproduce it, you can have, a lot of kids on stage and each of them has a role, whether they're good at dancing, then dancing, if it's music, then music. But also the story for me is very important because I call it a feminist celebration of African women heroes. And it's the story of it's an adventure story of twins who basically have to find a sacred seed to restore life in their community. Essentially, they live in an oasis, which is the last remaining oasis. The Sahara Desert has taken over and engulfed the entire continent, and they have to make sure that they preserve this oasis, but their water source has been cut off. So it's, yes, about climate, being aware of climate change and making sure that you remember that each individual can have some kind of impact, but also they're helped by their women ancestors along the way. So we revisit who is Ya Santewa, who is Mekatilile Wamenza, who is Hatshepsut. And through the stories that they tell by meeting these women tell them about their own struggles, how they fought against imperialism, but also give them clues as to how they need to unite and have courage to find the sacred seed. So the message is also important to me. So basically that
sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
So you have that as a play. Have you ever considered to have it as prose? I know a publisher.
Well, I will need a publisher because publishers can also, publish plays. The whole idea is
absolutely.
Yeah, to basically pull a team together to, stage this play in whatever big theater possible. But the idea is then to make the script available for free to schools with teaching guides and, educational exercises, so that at the end, the initial goal, which was to make sure that kids are not doing Cinderella at school, African kids, that, that this material is available to them. So that's the big project at the moment. I'm really trying to reach out to everybody that I know to see if there's any production money, if there's any theater that wants to take this on. But yeah, that's I think for me, the next.
That sounds absolutely exciting. And I can't wait to even talk to you more on it. Look at you,
on my list.
Maïmouna Shoyinka.
To talk to.
Maïmouna Shoyinka.
Amen.
Prudence, what's in the pot?
Yes.
What's cooking? What are we seeing from you in the next year, 2 years, etc.?
Okay, so obviously first, like I said before, definitely do more in terms of recording my music. But when Maïmouna started talking about a musical, I literally had goosebumps all over. And this is why 15 years ago, I had a vocal trainer, a German vocal trainer. She had just visited from Germany. And we started talking about Great Zimbabwe. This is a historic space here in Zimbabwe, and the beautiful acoustics that are there. And she planted a seed, like, you should do a concert there. But over the last 15 years, it's been brewing into a musical. And why I had goosebumps, the storyline is still obviously shaping up, but it wants to, it's taking place pre-colonial era, but also giving a message that it's not only now that women are, I know, like right now, women are fighting to be heard, to have an equal standing in society. But I know from my parents' stories, from grandmothers, great-grandmothers' stories, how women also held a very powerful or decision-making positions in their communities because they could and they were given that space. So it's a fictional story, but it's going to be inspired by some of those stories that that I have heard from the many women who know of their grandmothers who were intelligent enough that they were given leadership roles in that time. So so when you were going on, I was like, wait a minute, what is this? Is this someone who's saying, Prue, you need to start working on this? Look, other people are doing it, other sisters are doing it around, you know, Africa. So you gotta get it going on. So it's a 15-year-old idea that's still kind of developing, but it has come to that musical stage. I have written a couple of pieces for it. I just need to do a bit of research because the space that it's supposed to either take place in or have some kind of influence from is this place called Mashingo, the Great Zimbabwe Ruins. So I may have to definitely do a research on that. So that's the big other idea that needs to come into play besides doing the music, going back into the music. Yeah, so crazy. This is, yeah, freaky crazy.
We need to talk some more.
Yes.
I'm thinking, hey, if anybody is listening, there's two, absolutely, one already finished and another in progress. Fund it. Reparation time. Do you guys have any questions outside, or do you guys have any questions for each other? Or shall we continue?
I think mine for Maïmouna, it's not more of a question, but a request that, look, we need to check on each other, especially with these projects. Yeah, I need to, this idea is 15 years, and I think it's important that it starts getting to a place where it's going to be birthed.
Yeah, absolutely, Prudence. And it's funny you say that, you know, for you, the story part is where you're saying, okay, I still need to do research. I have the story, but I don't, the music part, I'm kind of a bit lost, you know, so we have different skills, different experiences. And for me, working together, collaboration, I just think is the way to go. Especially, I know, perhaps I shouldn't say this, but for me, my collaborations are always with women because I feel that there's a certain energy that we bring. Yeah. There's a certain professionalism that we also bring. So you mentioned that word earlier, but I do think so. And I'm not saying that, okay, I'm never going to work with any male team members or anything, but my experience recently where I've worked with women teams, the editor of the film was a woman, the production coordinator, you know, it's just worked. I don't know. There's a certain energy. There's an
energy, hey?
Yeah.
Like a total vibe.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. And I think we they will do, which is very important.
Yes, absolutely.
I think part of it is that we're constantly questioned, isn't it? So we then give it 120% or whatever, because we don't ever want to be questioned and doubted.
True.
And can I ask you a question, because I am curious in terms of when you're creating new music, what comes to you first? Is it generally a melody, or is it the words? I'm just curious about the process.
I've been asked that question, and I don't have a particular one process. Sometimes it's just a line, and I know that line has to be interpreted by a particular instrument, like maybe a bass line or a rhythm that's not being interpreted by drums, but maybe a horn section. Sometimes it's words. Sometimes it's a chord that I hear, and I decide to deconstruct it and manipulate it in a different way. So for me, the process is always, it comes to me differently all the time, and then it just develops from there. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh my goodness,
Fantastic.
yeah.
And you, when you write, Maïmouna, do you have everything fully formed in your head before you actually sit down and do a whatever, or do you say you start with a line and then you say I'll see where it takes me, and then sometimes leave it for like 5 months or whatever? How does your creative process work?
It really depends. So obviously when I'm working on adaptation, in a sense, it's an easier start-off point because you already have the plot. And I've always found that I struggle more with plot than with character. So when I already have, somebody has given me sort of the key parts of a plot, I very intuitively, the characters start speaking in my mind. With Water, for example, where I've written it from start, I've had to write and rewrite it. And it just starts from an idea. And, generally, I know that I want to tell a story about this. And I sit with it for quite a long time. But it's not a very controlled thing. I'll have like my key plot points, but it's often when I'm sitting out in the balcony in the evening when now suddenly things start coming to me, and I always have a notepad and I start developing the characters. And when that happens, that is, I think, why the pandemic for me was so good creatively, because I don't want to stop. When the characters start speaking, I can go on for 3 days nonstop, and they're literally just coming out and I'm hearing their voices. And I hate interrupting that process because when you interrupt it, it's really hard to then come back into it. It's only later in the editing process that then I work more on the structure. But I think a lot of it is based on characters, allowing characters to speak and then sort of fitting that around. Yeah, but
have they sometimes surprised you? Like you think, okay, this character is going to be like this, and then suddenly as you're writing it, they start saying some crazy stuff. And you're like, who are you? But I like it.
And I'm also quite surprised about how funny my characters are. I was like, oh, maybe I'm a bit funny myself. But
I hear that.
Really interesting is when you have a reading done of, like, for example, with Water, I had a group of South African actors do a reading of it. And I was listening in, but then hearing how they interpret the voice is also very interesting, because that allows me to go back to the text and make additional changes. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Are there any questions? We are left with all of 8 minutes before we finish this conversation, which has been absolutely fascinating, the art of interpreting and reinterpreting. Any questions from the audience? Nicole, I take it that's a no. Right. Muna.
Sorry, Zooks?
Okay, yeah,
can
sure.
I just wanted to find out, because I'm not a theater writer, but I wanted to find out, I know you spoke about developing a lot of the characters during the lockdown and stuff like that, but do you have a particular way of when you write, where you evolve those characters? Like, this is post lockdown and everything. When do you have that time? How do you create that time? Because I'm going to need to do that to develop a lot of the characters as well in my project.
Yeah. For me, I work full time. No, I don't work full time. I give communications workshops and things like that. But for example, this Water script. So I completed it during the lockdown. It was then selected by Acid, which is this children's theater program. I
know that one, yeah.
Yeah, for some mentorship. So then I rewrote it, but that was what, two years ago? But it's only last month that I rewrote the entire script, because I felt ready for it. I had given it to a couple of readers, so I had their feedback. But initially, when I receive feedback, I'm always like, because it's your baby, right? I'm like, I have to sit on it for a while. So I gave myself time. When I reread the feedback, I was like, this makes complete sense. So then I started applying the feedback to the script. But I do also think I don't know, there's a famous writer, I don't know if it was Ernest Hemingway, who was like, write drunk and edit sober. I think there's also that process where for me, when it's the splurging, the writing, it's quite informal, often notepad and pen, bits and pieces written in different notebooks and on the computer and stuff. And then it's when the editing process is taking part that I do it very soberly, let's say. But why was I able to do it last month? My son was away for a month, so I knew that I could do it uninterrupted. So for me, it's really on immersing myself in it and working on it day after day after day and printing it and then looking at it. So I guess a bit that's yeah.
All right. I'll have to create that time then.
Yeah. And that's
You know,
Zuki, you've written so many books. I know you basically set yourself, you wake up at 4 a.m. and you say, I'm going to do this in 6 months, right?
Yeah, she's incredible there.
Well, I actually don't have a choice, because if I'm going and I'm curating stuff and other stuff, what's it called? Artistic support services, if you will. Then perhaps in certain ways, I really need to carve out time so that I do that. But I think, obviously, I don't start writing if I don't have a story that, and sometimes I'll walk around with a story for a long time, but sometimes it just hits me. So for instance, the novel that I just submitted to my agent, Love, Marry, Kill, is something that I started in a very funny way, where I was just, I had this idea, and then I started writing, and the characters essentially wrote themselves, because I know I kind of do plot, but I think both of you are familiar with my work, and you know that they're very much character-driven narratives. So once I have the full-fledged idea of what my characters are like, I let them run with the story and see where they'll take me. So yeah, but I think it's really just trying to carve out time, because so often there is so much other stuff to do, and of course there are the bread and butter issues that you have to deal with, you know, in order to be able to get into the creative space.
But for me, that's almost magic, Azuki, when you say, like, when you let the characters run. For me, it's really a magic. It's something that I don't experience anywhere else in life, and which is why I can't stop doing this, because it really feels like juju. It's magic. It's like,
I know, right? It's like you're possessed. It's really like you're possessed. But I think that's why I also say, usually when I finish writing a manuscript, like a very first draft, because first draft is where it's at, you know, thereafter you're just editing and rewriting and stuff. But when I finish writing a first draft, I usually have to, like, just take 2 weeks off and just sleep and do nothing, because I'm exhausted. It's like those voices in my head are like, you know, finally they've been expunged. Yeah. And I am gonna ask you guys to give me some last words, because we're almost at the end of our time. And you know, this has been fascinating, because it has been a conversation, but it has also been like a learning process. It's been like a masterclass. Thank you guys. Last words, Prudence.
Last words. I guess I'm gonna try and see if I can get the video going for these last words. Last words is that maybe sharing with the upcoming generation is that never let anyone tell you that art is not important. It is more powerful than you can ever get to understand. And if it pulls you, and if you have something to say, you know, do whatever you can to make sure that that word is taken out into the world, because you never know what that message you hold, who it's going to change positively, you know, who in the world it's going to affect positively. So yeah, that's my last word.
Those are important words, Prudence, and I think maybe not just to the upcoming generation, but perhaps to us as parents and what you call it, to if our child has a talent, to nurture that and support them as much as we can. I know a friend of mine was very art inclined, and his parents wanted him to be a doctor, so they forced him to be a doctor, and he ended up going through some serious depression and stuff for the rest of his short life, which he ended. And but I suppose that could also be said to me, because my son, who I think is very musically inclined, just told me that he wants to be a dentist, and I was very offended. I was like, why don't you want to be an artist? Hey, last words, Muna.
Yeah, I'd love to echo what Prudence has just said, that definitely if this is something that you want to do, go for it. And I would just add that also, art is entertainment, but it's also a very powerful weapon that we have. And so many things that we need to talk about. We can't leave it up to the politicians to talk for us. We can't leave it up to the policymakers, corrupt regimes. I mean, art is a weapon. For me, definitely, I don't think that there's any art that I have done that doesn't have some kind of social message or political message. For me, it's my way of expressing my views, and in a way trying to make a little dent, a little change in this world through that work. And if only 5 people see it and are impacted by it, but it allows them to make a kind of change or to reflect on something differently, then for me, I feel like I have completed part of my mission. But yes, it is a political weapon, particularly for those of us who have been silenced for so long, particularly for those of us who are not necessarily, our voices are not blasted onto, mainstream media channels. For those of us who politicians have tried to silence all this time, it is a weapon. Let's use it, and let's make sure that we're spreading, important messages.
Yeah.
Maïmouna Jallow, Prudence Katomeni, thank you very much for being part of this. Everybody, I would urge you to go and listen to their stuff if you happen to be in Zurich at Strauhof Museum, and watch their stuff. It's still going on until September 3rd. And you can, of course, also catch Maïmouna's Tales from an Accidental City from the different festivals, and hopefully soon on one of the streaming agents. And you can catch Prudence music on YouTube. Thank you very much, ladies. It has been fantastic talking to you.
Thank you.